In this podcast, I'm joined by JJ Ducart and the boys from Lookout TV, Josh McAllister and Justin Fiskajohn, the Aquaman himself. We dive into some of his wild adventures out west, using water to his advantage, hunting some of these island deer, and some unique strategies and cool hunt breakdowns coming up from Lookout TV, guys.
The Deer Society podcast is brought to you by Illusion Hunting Systems, Onyx Hunt, Reveal Cellular Cameras, 10-Point Crossbows, Prime Archery, Loophole Optics, G5 Broadheads, Osseo Gear, Raw Frozen Scents, and HHA.
Well, guys, thanks for being here. Welcome to the Deer Society podcast studio. What do you think so far?
I've been waiting to come out here for quite some time. It's just a great place. The layout, seeing the whitetails, the operations. It's just super professional, and we're happy to be here and be a part of it.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment too. It's really cool to be here with you guys in person, following along with you guys over the last several years and watching the content. It's cool to be around you guys.
Well, we're pumped to have you guys be a part of the Deer Society team, and we just got done shooting some hunt breakdowns, a couple of your guys' hunts, and there's going to be some wicked ones coming out here this fall. Super excited about that, and definitely some unique perspectives, some unique ways of hunting, and just some different stuff than we have and showcase, here in the upper Midwest, I guess, Minnesota, Wisconsin. So excited to have you guys on board, and that's what we kind of want to talk about in this podcast is just some unique strategies, some unique hunts, and unique access more than anything. So Justin, I'm kind of going to throw it to you to start with. And we did a hunt breakdown that's going to be released here coming up, and you used water as a big access point, and it's a big part of what you do. JJ also coined you a new nickname. JJ, what is it?
The Aquaman.
The Aquaman. So I don't know if that's the hunt breakdown is going to be called or not, but Aquaman, solid name. But just talk to me a little bit, just to intro things, like kind of the way you hunt and how it's a little bit different than, what most people are used to.
Sure. Yeah, first off, I dig the new nickname. I like it. I can get behind that. Second off, I hunt primarily public land out in western North Dakota and eastern Montana. And hunting's got really, really popular over there over the last, couple decades. And growing up as a kid, we didn't have to, look for unique ways to hunt. We were hunting field edges and stuff like that. And there was big deer and an abundance of deer. And things have kind of evolved. We have kind of an oil boom out there. We've had more people move in. We have a huge increase in the amount of bow hunters, especially in that area. And it's kind of forced me into looking outside the box a little bit, right? How can I separate myself from everybody else? How can I hunt, differently than everybody else? And access, like we talked about in the hunt breakdown earlier today, is huge for me. How can I access spots that a lot of other people just can't or won't want to get to? For me, that's water. We have the Missouri and Yellowstone rivers specifically in the area that I hunt, and I have a multitude of different vessels to get me there. I have a kayak, 12-foot flat bottom, 14-foot flat bottom, 18-foot jet boat, rubber boots, waders, you name it. I've done it all. But water for me is huge. It allows me to access public ground, core ground, state ground, BLM, all that sort of stuff along both of those river systems. And I can kind of get back in there away from, the masses a little bit. So water access for me, huge.
The one vessel that I didn't hear you mention anything about, which I heard a story that Josh told me, was an inflatable raft from Walmart. I didn't hear that on the list of things.
Yeah, they didn't last more than one trip, unfortunately. We got a little gung-ho a couple years ago. We were turkey hunting out in Montana, and it was driving us nuts. There was birds out on an island, and killing me. We had to get out there. We went to the local Walmart and got a couple inflatable rafts. Not to throw them under the bus at all, but I would consider myself to be a little more water savvy than Mr. McAllister. And Mine made it across. His unfortunately and popped, and we both got a little wet. Our decoys were floating down the river. Our buddy's gun that we borrowed sunk to the bottom of the river.
Lost the gun.
It was gone.
It was
Never
gone.
recovered. And then we had one raft left, and we were stuck out on. Wouldn't recommend an inflatable raft for when you're crossing to be honest, but that's one we look back on and laugh now. But I have not got Josh back into another flotation device since. So
That's a telltale reminder. Justin, we laugh about it, but at the end of the day, that's a telltale sign of how aggressive Justin is when it comes to whatever he's doing. Because, we've been friends for a long time.
yeah,
Started sharing the woods with him, turkey hunting. That's when. And when it comes to that type of area, and some of the tactics and how aggressive, I've never seen anybody that he is when it comes to that type of terrain. And that's why he got it. He knows that area like the back of his hand. And if there's a target buck that he gets pictures of, it's pretty much over. Yeah.
So you're kind of hunting these bucks on islands, I guess, if you will,
Yeah.
right? What are those deer acting like? What are they doing? Are they crossing these rivers every day? They're living on the island, coming off of them, or they're spending all their time there? Just what does that look like?
One thing that I've always told everybody when it comes to hunting island deer is, to me, they're they can be on a completely different island. They can stay on the mainland, not come out there at all. The hunt breakdown that we did earlier today kind of referenced the hunt from 2024, where that was probably the most patternable deer that I've ever hunted in like an island type situation. But the vast majority of the time, there's no rhyme or reason to what they do. It's a different trail every day. It's a different bedding area every day. And it's pretty difficult to scout early season because the water level fluctuates so much along the river. Early August, end of July, the water out to the island, so they either stay out there primarily or they stay on the back and forth, which is where I like to hunt. Just specifically for access purposes, I like to be able to get in and out where I'm not crossing these deer. They change so much. It's so difficult to pin them down. End of summer, the crops are getting harvested. The mosquitoes are. Deer will kind of retreat up into the breaks, into the hills, out of the. And it won't be until the last couple weeks of August into September where you'll start seeing these deer somewhat kind of move back. A little bit of a pattern, but as a whole, like in my experience hunting Montana and North Dakota, these deer along the river bottoms and islands are super, super difficult to pattern.
Interesting.
How big are these islands you're talking about?
There's all sorts of different sizes. I mean, there's some islands that I've hunted that, you could throw a football from one side to the other, right? And there's some that you could hike for over a mile. And it's, or hunting season, even in September, a lot of these islands that we're talking about aren't truly islands. They're not completely surrounded by water anymore. There's either very little water or pockets of water. So during the summer when the water's high, they're completely surrounded on every side by water. But as that water feeds, those deer kind of seek that as bedding refuge when they're going out to these islands to get away from hunting pressure and things of that nature. And there's also a ton of good bedding, cool bedding, and a variety of feed out there between willows and Russian olives and other plants and stuff like that. But vary quite a bit.
So, in a situation like that, in which if you guys watch it, you'll see this deer, becomes pretty patternable, right? And he's using the same trail a lot. If you get into a situation where a deer is maybe not using that same pattern there, like, are you diving back in further and trying to get like ahead of them maybe in the morning when they're still out on feed? Or is it more of a sporadic, like, hey, I'm going to pick a trail today, play the wind and get lucky? What's that look like?
Yeah, trail cameras are huge for me in kind of determining. I try to deploy a lot of these, and they kind of help me put the pieces of the puzzle together, right? You can kind of start looking at wind direction and barometric pressure and stuff like that, and see if these deer are taking a specific trail on a certain wind or something along those lines. And that kind of helps you narrow it down a little bit. But season has always been, I don't want to be too intrusive. There's not a ton of hunting pressure when it's super hot. Mosquitoes are bad along the river early on. So I want to be smart about it. I don't area or hunt further back in. One thing we've talked about, and I reference that a lot because there's one specific depth that I want to get into, and that's generally like where these deer are crossing from these islands or these bedding sources and heading out to food. So I can use water or sand where I'm not leaving as much human scent behind, and I'm always utilizing like one specific depth to access these trail cameras or these tree stands or ground blinds or whatever I'm using to hunt. But I always try to sit back and kind of watch from a distance, sit in an observation spot. Maybe I'm seeing these deer come off a spot that I don't have a camera, right? So early season or towards the end of summer, I like to sit a lot of observation spots, kind of start putting the pieces together. And if I feel confident in a hunt a trail, and I know that there's not going to be a deer that comes on the north side of me that catches my wind if it's a south wind or vice versa. If I can get in and I feel really confident that I could hunt a spot where I know I could kill, but also where I'm not going to blow anything out of there, that's kind of my strategy early on. Like you talked about with this deer in 2024, I mean, he in a really, when I kept getting consistent pictures and videos of him on that one trail, I knew when I had the right wind, which was the south wind, I could get in there, not be intrusive at all. If he didn't show up, I didn't leave any scent. I didn't walk across any of his trails that he was using. It was kind of a win-win situation. And in that particular case, it was. And traditionally on my public, I always tell everybody I want as many first sits as I can have, right? So what I mean by that is I don't want to step. I don't want to be in there tromping around. I want to have all of my trees marked that I want to hunt out of, or spots that I want to set up with the ground blind. I want to have all of that marked, whether it's and I want to be able to go in there. Like if I'm hunting in the morning, I'm setting up in the dark before that morning's hunt. So I have zero through there for that first time. And that's been a super successful strategy for me over the years.
Right on. I want to jump back real quick to the depth conversation. So we've obviously talked a lot about it today, but for somebody listening, you talk about depth and that depth being, a distance between food and bedding, for example.
Sure.
Can you just elaborate on that a little more and explain like what you mean by that does for you?
Yep. So for me, depth, like a certain depth, whether maybe that's 200 yards off the wraps around, in a lot of these island settings, it's not just a straight have curvatures, the way that the channel flows through. On like an island setting, because it's just the sandbar, right? It's from the mainland. That's the depth that I want to be at as far as tree stands, ground blinds, that sort of thing. So I'm always at, and the deer are traveling east and west. So I'm not source. That information to me is kind of to know exactly where they bed. I don't need to know exactly where they specific depth that's between the two, where I have the best as least intrusive as I could possibly. It's not an island setting, then if it's off an ag field, then maybe it's 200 yards off that egg field. I'm going to put a camera out on every trail that I come across. If I'm going east and west and the deer are traveling north and south, I'm going to pick my depth and I'm going to just walk basically in a straight line, and I'm going to drop a camera at every trail I come. Doubling down on the same trail with, cameras at different distances off the field edge between the field and the bedding source. I don't want to have multiple. I'm interested in just the intel at that certain depth.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of different out every 50 yards, like a big heavy trail, and then you see some lighter ones, and then it's another, like what's the distance between each camera? Because I'm sure there's a lot of small trails between cameras.
Yep. Depends on the amount of sign too, right? So when I'm or so much too, because it kind of gives you the most recent information. You can tell, is there any sort of buck tracks on this trail, right? You can tell trails, because there are some trails that maybe they're a little thicker and early season when the deer are in velvet, maybe those bucks don't want to push less dense cover that they can come out of off that island. But generally speaking, Onyx is another tool that I utilize quite a bit, or any sort of satellite imagery where I can get on there and you can kind of see the historical data of where some of the there, and then you can kind of go out there and compare that to what's actually in the field. And that gives you a good starting point, because if there's somewhat of a trail, odds are they're probably using those trails for a reason year after year after year, whether it's there's good bedding on the other side of that trail on the island side, or it's easier access. Gradual, they can get up and down a little easier, but sometimes there's 3 or 4 cameras within 75 yards, and then you have a 300-yard stretch. A lot of times I've noticed that kind of correlates with where they're getting up onto the island or up onto the mainland. There could be a really steep bank there, and there's just no easy way for those deer to get in and out. So you'll find spots that are a little island side, 100 yards one way or 100 yards the other way, but they kind of funnel down, and then there's an easier spot where they're going to get up on the mainland side where it's not quite as steep.
Josh, your hunting strategy is a little different, obviously, based on location and just in things that you do. So, like, as far as, trail cameras and accessing, especially now this time of year as we're getting into late summer and getting into the fall, what are you doing with your trail cameras now in preparation for some scouting and getting some?
A lot of it depends on the properties that I'm going to hunt. They all differ. Some of them smaller, some of them larger. Ohio is a lot of small parcels, super pressured. A lot of people feed, use mineral, use corn. But this time of year, these deer have a very small, they don't travel a whole lot, right? They don't travel miles to food. They have a very small area that they're living at in the summer until they decide to branch off, usually, and are going to stay in their summer areas where they're living at right here on camera, usually 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th of October, they've moved off. They're starting to venture off into different areas. So now till then, the deer are probably going to stay in the same areas, and I'm just basically running cameras on mineral sites, obviously. But, deer aren't, people think that these bucks are going to live on mineral 24/7 every to have other things in their diet. So you're not going to have bucks. You got to, think outside the box. A lot good locations for this time of year is a cool hollow with a water source or a lot of soft browse. My favorite, August, September, is I want to get in thick cover or on the edge of cover. I like to create community in that in the last several years. I'll create mock scrapes in certain locations and set cameras on them, and just as it September, the buck's testosterone feel a little bit more frisky each and every day. They start to venture out just a little bit more. And I'll just let the cameras do my work. Like I said, some of the properties there's no farming, there's no pressure, so you can't go in there all the time. You have to be very careful about going in and out of there. Some of the other places, they have a lot of activity. The deer are used to it. You hear people talk about that quite a bit with different farms, and a lot of people say, well, you can't go in there. I think it just depends on how much activity and what's going on in that farm. If the deer are used to a lot of farmers going in there, people riding side by sides, and they're used to that. You're not a threat to them. They adjust to that. Some places, when they don't see nothing, a farmer, a side by side, a human, and you go in there 1 or 2 times, it's over. You blow it out. Let my camera soak for, May, June, July. Go back to a card pull. I'll pick up what bucks is on the place. From that intel, I'll put together a couple bucks that I want to target on that place. I'll sit just a little bit. I'll start to take cellular cameras, get a little tighter, and I'll stay out of there. And Ohio towards the end of September, first part of October, give or take a day each year. And usually the bucks that you're going to have on your property back home, if they're there by October 10th, you're probably going to have them there if they haven't moved off. And that's the strategy I use. So I love hunting using scrape. Are going to go to a corn pile or go to a mineral site. They're just not. It might be a smart old buck, and he just don't like, he knows what's going on. So I'll try to utilize, mock scrapes the best I can. Usually have some pretty good success with it.
Yeah, outside of the top food source early for you, I know in your hunt breakdown you talked about acorns. What about compare that to a feeder? Are the feeders drawing deer away from those big food sources, or are they still pretty active on the soybeans and
usually early season, they want to go to where the beans are the greenest or freshest or latest planted. A lot of that depends on, like, this year. This year was so wet, had a lot of storms. It was difficult to get planted that I've been used to seeing them planted. They didn't even touch them. Let it go. So what do the deer do, right? They're going to move. They're going to relocate. Maybe there's a bean field down planted and it's 6 inches tall in second week of July. That's where they're going to go. Not every one of them, but you just got to figure out what food sources they're a big time player coming into September and October. You can have them, people don't get it. Like, you can have a food source, whether it be a bean field or a corn pile, which back in Ohio legal, and it's taken the state by storm. It's like parcel has feed on it, but once the acorns going to be 100%, so you have to go in straight to the white oak trees. Access to hunt there, that's where I'm going. Yeah, I'm good. Acorns are such a huge player in early season hunting. If you don't have the acorns back home, they might be on feed. They might be on a late planted bean. Acorns drop, that's it. That's where they're going. People, and then you get into the October lull or that middle October period, and you got to hunt tighter on them. They're not going to move as much. Getting heavy, right? They're getting kind of lazy. They know what's to start hunting a little tighter. You necessarily can't field edge where you was seeing them 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. Where I like to go in, figure out where they're going to be, maybe figure out scrape, and then I'll wait for the right weather front towards. I had success doing that.
Right on. With Aquaman over there, It's easy to see that those deer are obviously utilizing those rivers and can readily drink, whenever they want to, basically. For you in the spots, water situation like there, obviously, you're not using the boat, but just from a drinking water source standpoint, or creeks, or what kind of draws that for those deer around you?
I've started to dabble just a utilizing, man-made ponds, stuff like that. And a lot of people is noticing just how much they've missed by not using them. It's such a key living and diet and habitat. They have to have it. And so I've utilized some ponds, small ponds here in the last couple of years, seen a little bit of, I don't have any, it's mainly steep terrain down there where I'm located, where I do the majority of my hunting. Steep terrain, big hills. You got to utilize the terrain to your advantage. The water, you're going to have your basic creeks in the bottoms, nothing too big. I'm not around any big rivers. I'm not really around any big ponds. It's just these hollows, these head of the hollows where they have water seeps and drainages. Those big bucks love to just lay in that. It's cooler in early season. Usually stays a little bit damp. Sometimes there'll be some mountain laurel. You'll hear about that in areas on faces of hills. There'll be some mountain laurel. They love to lay around the mountain laurel. That's places you can focus on early season where the bucks to venture off, right? They start to separate. They start to disperse. That's when you need to start looking at acorn flats, because they want to get by themselves. They want their buck. He's not going to be around a big group of people, big group of deer. He wants to be by himself. So,
Justin, kind of jumping back to you a little bit here and circling back to early season. So, you gotten super creative with some of the ways that you hunt, especially with, or maybe to use a ground blind. Give people a little taste, like if they watch the hunt breakdown coming up, what they're going to see for like your setup and how you were able to shoot that buck early season this year.
Yeah, no, like you said, there's a lot of spots that I hunt along these willow bars or these islands where there's not tree stand options, right? There's not trees big enough to get into. This particular, and the way that the terrain kind of laid there, it was ended up cutting down a in the sand, and I dug a chair in there to where I could basically be sitting, be ready, have my bow in my hand, and where he was utilizing quite a bit. I set it up so that I could be at full draw before I ever saw him, before the deer ever got into my shooting lane, and they'd be kind of quartering away by the time they got into my shooting lane. So even if I had to draw when they were already walking out, I wasn't going to get busted. So yeah, I was able to use a machete and a handsaw and a shovel to assemble kind of like a makeshift ground blind on the ground. And it was kind of cool. It was like a little bit of a ledge because the water kind of cuts a channel out around there, right? And I was able to sit a little higher than where this deer was on him by the time he dropped down that bank and started crossing. It ended up working out super cool. I haven't killed a ton of deer. I usually try to find some way that I can get up the option I had, and he was in love with that trail for whatever. Again, getting back to I kind of had to wait for a south wind, which isn't super common in that part of the state, like early season. A south wind or a west wind's a little on the north side of his trail, and that was where my north. So I was able to sneak in and out of there without ever. That was huge for me. And once I had a wind that I could make work, snuck in there, got dug into the sand, and you guys will watch how that all plays out, but it was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, and a couple other things that you're dealing with there too is I think your trail camera was probably on a stake in the water. So you don't have no trees to hang trail cameras on or sand, so you're hunting from the ground, camera in the water. We talked about the food sources kind of more in the Ohio area. What are your deer feeding on early?
We've actually had a little bit of a change in what is primarily their food source over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. Sugar beets for early season and late season was always such a huge crop for us out there. The sugar beet factory out there closed down here a couple of years ago. So now sugar beets have been kind of eliminated. Nobody plants them or harvests them anymore. And I think I was more upset about that than anybody else in the entire area, because I know how many harsh winters the sugar beet tailings kept our deer herds alive, and they were such an awesome late season food source for a lot of the deer in the area. So they've kind of transitioned into a lot of corn. I think corn has primarily replaced what was once sugar beets, and I know deer love it.
Back prime example, 2021. Remember that?
Yeah.
The hidden giant standing.
Yeah. No, I know the deer food source. Me personally, as a hunter, scouting and stuff late season, I hate it. I can't see anything. The deer live out there. It's so much harder to scout. You can't drive around in glass fields like you could in a sugar beet field or a hay field or a bean field. It makes it way more difficult to scout. The food source is great, and honestly, the struggle for me to not be able to scout them, everybody has that struggle. So I think it does kind of help with hunting pressure, and it gives those get as much pressure too. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse, to be honest. But yeah, primarily corn, alfalfa. We see a lot of soybeans out there now, some peas. My favorite plot was always sugar beets, and those are.
But typically you're hunting
So
private.
we do have some food sources, like Josh referenced when he shot that big velvet with me a few years ago when we were kind of racing the clock against EHT. We had a lot of deer dying. I think that was soybeans that year on that.
That was wrapped in a little stretch of corn.
Yeah.
And other people was scouting it. Other people was glassing it from the road, but they couldn't see what we was seeing.
Yeah.
Heading back. But Justin was going in there and diving down there with us. The outside of that bean field was standing corn. And this big mega giant 8 full velvet was standing in that corn eating all the time. And Justin would just sit back and watch. Never saw him. And that year's when EHD. And they was actually finding the deer dying as I was flying out there. He's like, dude, I don't think this deer's going to make it. We might not have a chance. We're going to be lucky if we get an opportunity to see this deer. I think he's going to die. And with the second night in, we ended up killing him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he was feeding on that corn. He was gunning the beans, but his main focus for early in the year was that standing corn.
Yeah. So we do have a handful of spots that are public ground, in the river bottoms there, that, hay fields, corn fields, that sort of stuff, where we can access the egg fields. Where I killed that deer in 2024, all of the food sources were all on private that I couldn't get access to. So I was hunting, the transition area between bedding to food in that particular case. And that's how it is the majority of the river. It's private egg fields, and then, some of the islands and stuff like that that's hard to access. That's public ground.
What scrapes? Do you focus on scrapes? Are they as prevalent out there?
Yeah, so kind of like Josh said earlier, I'll start looking at scrapes. I try to be as unintrusive as possible the first few months of season. I'm kind of starting on the perimeter, as close to a food source or a transition area as I can, and just kind of staying out of the bedding area. In a bedding area during the rut, and then during the off season, summer or shed hunting and stuff like that, I try to get in and mark a lot of the activity, scrapes and rubs and that sort of thing. But once I kind of transition into early bow season, and I don't know that we have as much of a lull as it is just it's a month and a half into hunting season, and once that part of the season kind of rolls around, that's when I start kind of moving my cameras to scrapes. And I have, that intel from previous years. They'll make scrapes under Russian olives and a lot of the same spots every year. So that's when I'll kind of move my trail camera inventory over scrapes. And I haven't had a ton of success personally hunting or killing deer over scrapes, but it more or less is a way for in what's on that particular island or that particular piece, and get inventory of the deer that are still around. And then I can kind of start putting the pieces together and figuring out how I'm going to hunt them, and that leads right up into rifle season for me. I've utilized cameras over scrapes to kind of narrow down, good deer, hunt the transition area from that island or that bedding source towards the food sources. And I've killed some great deer doing that too.
Right on. Well, definitely some unique strategies, some unique content. If you guys are listening to this or watching, be on the lookout for hunt breakdowns coming out, because there are 2 awesome hunt breakdowns on Josh and Justin. So definitely check those guys out too. Lookout TV. We're excited to have them on board Deer Society team this year. We appreciate the stories. We appreciate you bringing the unique aspect, and looking forward to a great fall and a great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Check out all the new stuff. New apparel still out there. There's a few items left. They're going fast, but get your hands on that stuff while you can. And also check out all the new stuff. The new Skullmaster line, extinguisher, black rack. They may come in handy here in a few months. So appreciate you tuning in.
Illusion Hunting Systems, Onyx Hunt, Reveal cellular cameras, 10-point crossbows, Prime Archery, Loophole Optics, G5 broadheads, Osseo gear, Raw frozen scents, and HHA.